Hey, everybody.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you? I'm a bit under the weather
Uh,
today.
yeah.
My coughing and sneezing and all that, so I apologize. How are you guys doing? All right, so let's get started. I want to review. This is our exam three review. It's going to be a lot like class, a little bit more detailed than class yesterday and class today. Okay. So this is what what we need to know for each of the concepts. There's three concepts in week 7, 4 in week 8, and 2 in week 9. Okay, so your weekly notes that you get sent are very detailed. Okay, very detailed. So that's the most important piece to pull out is those 3 weeks of notes. That has all the very detailed concept information. Now we need to pull out what knowledge we need to know with each of the concepts going into the exam. Okay. All right. So let's start with, well, first of all, the exam. Um, Same exam is 1 and 2. Okay. 50 questions, 75 minutes. Hang on. I've given you in the study guide, I've copy and pasted all the concepts, I've copy and pasted all the readings. So you have an easy um, check back. You don't have to go back to your weekly notes. Everything's right there as far as your readings. I would start with your weekly notes. And then if you need more information on your weekly notes, then I would go back to the readings. Does that make sense? Okay. Um, what question? There's really no difference on the exam. It's the same. It's the same setup as the other two. Hang on. It's the same setup as the other two. Okay. So let's go back to week 7 and talk about infectious disease prevention and control. We talked about this in class the last 2 days. Why is it so critical to monitor infectious diseases, communicable diseases, outbreaks, prevention, control in the community? Why is it so critical? And look what happened with the pandemic. Spread like wildfire, right? Look what happens when you have a flu outbreak. What role do we play? What role do we play as nurses in the community? We can be involved in epidemiology, right? The tracking, surveillance, observation, right? Reporting. We report, we track, we surveil, we educate, right? What else about infection control and communicable diseases are critical for us to know as community nurses? How things
What
spread?
diseases?
Go ahead.
What diseases to report to the CDC?
Yep. Yep. There's a whole list of reportable diseases we have to report that are highly infectious, highly contagious. Now, those are found throughout your local health departments and your state health departments, but there is a national database through the CDC. Okay, but all state health departments are required to or we are required to report to them, especially your local. All right. So as far as reporting, who reports? That can be us as nurses, right? It was me in the schools, right? Doctors' offices, if something comes back positive, hospitals, long-term care facilities, urgent care. Everybody's required to report, and we're all held to the same standards. All right, so that's really, really important to know. Okay. Um, One of the, or a couple of infectious diseases to talk about here are first HIV. Okay. What do we want to know about HIV? How is it spread?
Blood.
Pardon me?
Blood.
Yep. How else?
Bloodborne.
Well, it's bloodborne, yes. How is it spread?
Infected needles.
Affected needles. What else? Sexual
Other body.
contact, right? Body fluids, breast milk, right? Okay, we know that clients that have other sexually transmitted diseases are definitely at more risk for HIV, right? Due to the why? Traumatized tissue, right? Other STDs, including chlamydia, syphilis, herpes, gonorrhea, much more. You have one of those, much more at risk for, sorry, I have to sneeze, much more at risk for developing HIV. What about testing? Why do you ask if somebody's being tested for HIV? Why do you ask them to come back in 3 months to retest?
To give it time to get in the system, I guess.
Right? Because what can happen in the first 12 weeks?
Won't show up as positive until 12 weeks later.
Say that again.
It won't show up as positive till 12 weeks later.
Yeah, you may not, it may take up to false report. Yep. It may take up to 12 weeks for positive serology. Right? That's one thing to remember. Open lesions, inflamed tissue certainly increase the risk of HIV, right? And then we talked about it in class, HIV infected people who live close near one another, specifically, let's say correctional facilities who live in close housing, all right? They must be carefully screened and they must be deemed non-infectious before they are taken into the facility, right? A person with HIV is much more susceptible to opportunistic infections, right? Same thing with TB. I'm using the correctional facility again, crowded living conditions. All right. TB, microbacterial disease. How is it spread?
Airborne.
Airborne droplets, right? Airborne droplets. And believe it or not, 95% of the people who come up positive TB becomes latent. What does that mean? Latent. What does that mean?
Curable. They're chronic.
It's latent. It sits inside but is not active. Latent, right? And then how do we initially screen for TB? How is that done? Think about when you get a new job, what do you have to do?
Skin test.
What?
Skin test.
Your skin test. Your skin test, right? What happens if your skin test is positive?
X-ray.
X-ray. Okay. How do you protect yourself as a healthcare worker from clients, or let's say you're going in to do a home visit? How do you protect yourself from a client who's positive with TB? What needs to happen?
Proper PPE.
Okay, and what is that?
N95 mask.
N95 with filter respirators, right? Okay, private room, if possible, right? And then think about medication. There's a mandatory medication regimen, right? This is, if it's in the community, people are positive in the community, it is up to the health department to follow through with that person, family, whomever. That requires mandatory visits to make sure that person is complying with the medication regimen. It's that important. Okay. Directly observed therapy for those. Yep, we just talked about that. Community health nurse observes medication for compliance. We talked about the N95. Okay. STDs, a few of them you need to know about. Chlamydia, gonorrhea, bacterial or viral? Chlamydia and gonorrhea. Bacterial, which means what?
It's curable.
It's treatable, right? How is chlamydia and gonorrhea spread?
Sexual, mainly through sexual contact, right?
Correct. Correct. Hang on, sorry. Okay, treated with antibiotics. What are some other teaching methods with this kind of STD? All treatment, all sexual contact needs to be stopped until treatment is completed, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's a teaching point. Okay, another teaching point, all sex partners in the last 60 days should be contacted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And treated. Okay, symptoms can be asymptomatic, right? And with these two particular STDs, I think we had a quiz question about this, can cause pelvic inflammatory disease, right? Potentially, PID can potentially lead to infertility, endometriosis, pelvic adhesions. So remember that quiz question, what do you want to teach? If you have what?
Watch for abdominal or pelvic pain.
Abdominal and pelvic pain. Do you remember that from the quiz question?
Yeah, I do remember that question.
Yep. Okay. And then another STD that we talked about was syphilis. Okay, can begin as a painless sore canker, right? But syphilis moves through the lymph system, correct? Typically, or commonly, it has stages, right? And at what stage might you finally have the positive serology or the positive diagnosis? It may not be in the first stage, right? For a positive diagnosis, positive serology, it's a second stage with syphilis, right? That's in your notes. Okay. So the other thing to remember, it's bacterial, right? So if it's not treated with antibiotics in either the first or second or primary or secondary stage, it becomes latent and can reactivate, right? And it's not treatable in the third stage. So let's say it's latent, at primary, secondary, it's not treated, right? It becomes latent and reactivates later in life, causing severe damage in many areas of the body. So that's tertiary, and at that point, it's not treatable, which is why you have to have it treated in the first or second stage. And you might not even see a positive serology for the second stage until the second stage, right? Guys, remember that? Remember talking about that? Okay.
Yes.
Next, STD is the herpes simplex, which is either regular herpes or genital herpes, right? It may spread during outbreaks, right? How does it spread? Shedding, right? Shedding in viral outbreaks. Is it viral or bacterial?
Viral.
So what does that mean? Can it be treated with antibiotics?
No.
No. So
Virals.
what are you treating?
The symptoms.
Symptoms. It becomes symptom management, right? Lifelong condition. It can stay in remission, stay latent, but it's lifelong. Okay, no cure. Okay. Now, there are antivirals that you can use to treat, but again, that's symptom management, right? What do we know? A couple of bullet points. These are in your notes. Always contagious. It's not typically specific to just the general area, right? Starts as blisters. Blisters may ulcerate, last for several weeks. Maybe the virus moves into the nerves. That's where you hear about shingles, right? No antibiotics because it's viral. And it definitely can be passed through the birth canal during delivery, right? Okay. Next one is HPV. What's HPV?
Human pap virus.
Yep. Uh-huh. Okay. And how is that spread? Vaginal, anal, oral sex with somebody who has the virus. Okay. It's most commonly spread during vaginal or anal sex. Right. It also can be spread through skin to skin, close contact. Okay. And you can be asymptomatic and still spread it. Right. But the good news is there's an HPV vaccine. That's what I want you to know about this. There is a vaccine. It's a 3-dose vaccine regimen. Okay. It protects against most prevalent infections, genital warts, precancerous cervical lesions. Okay. But not against everything, but it's a vaccination. It's safe and effective. Okay. So that's what I want you to know about HPV is there's a vaccination available. What else is there a vaccination available for? I want to jump.
Hepatitis C.
Okay, that's what I want to jump back to. In infectious disease and prevention control, I want to talk about 2 things I missed. One was hepatitis and smallpox. What's hepatitis? Viral, bacterial.
Viral.
Okay. Is it reportable?
Yes.
Absolutely, it's reportable. Because it's extremely contagious, right? And we have Hep A, Hep B, Hep C. How is Hep A spread?
Fecal oral contact.
Yep, yep, yep. What about Hep B? How's that spread?
Blood.
Right? Blood. So at risk, population, IV drug users, persons with other STDs, multiple sex partners, those from other countries with high rates of hepatitis, right? Healthcare workers also can be at risk. And again, correctional institutions where you have crowded living conditions. Okay. And that's the Hep B that we have a vaccine for. When is the vaccine given or started?
After birth.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. And then what about Hep C? Also bloodborne, right? What's the difference between B and C though? There is no vaccine for C. What's the big difference with C?
It can cause chronic liver failure, cirrhosis.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. So hepatitis C is extremely serious. Okay. It can be latent and latent and latent for years and years. Okay. It can be asymptomatic as well. But the chronic long-term damage is what is a problem for hepatitis C. Smallpox, how would you identify somebody? Let's say somebody came to your clinic or urgent care with a rash that looked like chickenpox. Little pustules, some crusted, maybe not crusted, but they also said they may have been exposed to smallpox. What are you going to do? Where specifically will you look to be able to tell whether we're talking smallpox or varicella?
The soles on their feet. The soles of their feet.
And where else, IKEA?
I
There's
thought
2
I read
places.
that was it. Is that somewhere else?
Palm of your hands, right? Okay, so read about smallpox. Rash starts as small red spots in the tongue and in the mouth. Right? They change into sores. They spread like wildfire. And they end up digging like craters. Right? So be able to identify if somebody were to present, that's also on your HESI. I think that's on your HESI as well. talked about HIV, we talked about TB, we talked about all the way up to HPV. Okay, let's cover some bioterrorism and disaster. What kinds of disasters are there? There's two kinds.
Natural and
True.
man-made.
Say that again.
Natural and man-made disaster.
Okay, give me some examples of natural.
Like things happening and without not in your control, like the hurricanes and earthquakes and things like that.
Okay,
And
they're natural. We don't have any control over them. Hurricanes, tornadoes, right? And even think about it, communicable disease outbreaks,
right.
right? Then we have man-made, which is what? We contribute to it. So give me some examples of that.
Fires.
Fires. What else?
Like poisons, like
Poison. Yep.
Pollution.
Pollution, air pollution, water pollution. Things that we contribute, right? Part of your notes say that as a nurse, we should recognize that we are expected to participate in any of the impact stages or any of the stages. What are the stages of a disaster? You have your preparation or preparedness, right? Your impact stage, your post-impact stage, and your recovery. Right? So let's think of what roles we could be playing in each of those stages. What are we doing in the preparedness stage? What might we be doing in the community?
Kit for disaster, like a disaster kit, preparing them for that.
Let's say we're doing that with families. We're doing an in-service or a teaching or a program on how to prepare for a disaster, and we talk about getting together a disaster kit. What is that going to include?
first aid,
What?
food, like first aid, food, little drills.
How
and
much
stuff
food? For how long?
Non-perishable food.
For how many days?
Like you said, how many days in particular to have it? Okay, no, I was trying to
3
figure out.
days. There's very specific guidelines. Okay. If you're going to get asked about helping a family prepare for a disaster kit, 3 days of food has to be looked at every 6 months for expired items. Correct? Everybody needs to know where it's located. Everybody needs to know how to turn off the utilities. Think about it. It's a preparation for disaster. Okay. And then you may be asked, when is it safe to drink water again? What's your answer? When is it safe to drink water again? You will get asked that after a disaster.
After you boil it with bleach.
Okay, be more specific. Look back at your notes.
1 milliliter of bleach per gallon of water.
Sitting for 30 minutes. That's one. Boil for 3 to 5 minutes. And making sure you've emptied all the water out of your heaters and your hot water heaters, because that's all contaminated water. So if you're part of the preparation or even impact stage, you got to know that. Right? I know it sounds pretty basic. When is it safe to drink the water again? Well, there are specific guidelines. You need to know that. Okay, so water is safe to drinking boiling 3 to 5 minutes, treating it with household bleach, 1 ml per gallon. Let stand for 30 minutes and then draining the water. And then you may have certain chemical spills that's the actual disaster. Okay, so we have 3 kinds of chemical spills, or 3 kinds of chemicals. All right, vesicant, nerve, and blood. What I need you to know is an example of each one of these and what particular systems of your body are affected. So let's review that. So a vesicant, that may be like a mustard gas. Okay, what's affected are with vesicant chemicals, your eyes, your skin, and your respiratory. Okay, So if you're given a scenario that the client is experiencing this, you have to be able to say what kind of a chemical it is. Blood agent could be cyanide. And with a blood agent, it is straight up respiratory. Immediate respiratory distress and complications. And then with, I'm sorry, that's nerve. I apologize. So your vesicant is your eye, skin, and respiratory. Your nerve, which is your sarin, like a sarin gas, is all respiratory. Then you have your blood chemicals. So that would be a cyanide. Okay. And that has to do with skin and respiratory. So just have an idea of what systems are impacted by those three kinds of chemical agents. Okay. Home care. Really, as far as home care, there's a few things. Not much. Home care. There's two major points about home care that you need to know. Where the care is provided and the who is being provided the care. So where is home care provided?
In the home.
It's in the home. It's the client's environment. What is your assessment of a client in the hospital? Why would that look different and take much longer than doing? Why would a home assessment? Why would an assessment of a client in a home take longer than your assessment of your patient in the hospital? What's different about being in the home? You're on mute, Abigail.
You're a guest in the home, so
Correct.
you're focusing on the patient.
And you're trying to establish a relationship, right? What other parts, during a home visit, what else can you take advantage of doing that you may not be able to do in the hospital setting? What other kind of assessments can you do? Numerous. You do a safety assessment, right? Risk to fall assessment, environmental assessment, right? Are there anything at risk environmentally in the home? Does the patient live alone? Does the client live alone? You can do maybe a neglect assessment if there are other family members living in the home, right? You can do a family assessment if there's others living in the home. What's the dynamics? Everybody get along? Does the patient seem like they're being neglected? So lots of stuff can happen during a home visit. They say that doing home visits in the community is one of the most important roles as a community nurse is getting in that home and seeing what's going on. Okay. The other thing about home care is lots of people may be involved. All right. You may be working with a case manager. Let's say you're the home health nurse. You may be working with a case manager. You may be helping to coordinate with PT, OT. Okay. You have to be aware of the available resources in your community. Every visit you make, the client's going to require different kinds of resources, right? So one of the things the public health nurse, community nurse has to have available at their fingertip is all the different resources in the community, right? And remember, caring of complex chronic illnesses in the community is going to be the most common kind of patient you're caring for, right? So we're talking diabetes, cirrhosis, hypertension, maybe mental issues, substance abuse. Okay. What else do we want to know about home care? Yeah, home care is very collaborative, right? You may be working with a big team, and so communication is important, but also the risk of miscommunication is also there. The more people you have involved, the more risk you are for miscommunication, right? Let's see, we talked about community resources. Give me some examples of community resources. What are some community resources people might
on
need?
Wheels,
Meals.
I'm sorry, Meals on Wheels.
Yep.
Uh, private duty services,
Mhm.
therapy like PT,
Yep.
PT and OT,
Food
adult,
banks,
yes.
food banks, clothing banks, maybe
Yes.
domestic violence shelters, maybe crisis pregnancy centers. I mean, think about all the resources necessary in your community, right? What do you do about working with cultures that are different from yours in the community? Let's say you do a home visit and nobody speaks English. What do you do?
Get an
We talked about this in
interpreter.
class, Joy. What do you do?
Yes, get an interpreter or someone,
Yeah.
some type of official that can help you, Sorry about that. I know it's a little noise. But
No.
yeah, someone who can better help you understand or even do your own research.
Right. We talked about this in class. What kind of community leaders can you seek out? Right? There are community
Like
leaders that can help you get to know this part of the community, the culture. It can help you with the barriers, whether they're health access or language barriers or getting your kids into school or working your kids go for a checkup or right. You've got to be able to seek out people in the community that can help you, right? Case management. What's a case manager?
A coordinator of care.
Coordinator of care. What kinds of clients are case managed?
Chronic
Oh,
illnesses.
Joy, you can't be in your car.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I had to pick my
Okay.
niece up. She's stuck. So can
You're
I
gonna have
just
to,
mute it?
no, you're gonna have to log off and then just remember that you caught the first half hour. So watch the recording from 30 minutes back. We're not gonna be that much longer, but you caught the first 30 minutes. So just when you go to my recording, go to 30 minutes and watch it forward.
Okay. Sorry about that. I didn't know
No,
because it was a review. I'm sorry, but thank
mm-mm.
you.
You're welcome. Thanks for
Okay.
coming.
Okay.
All right, so Abigail, case management. The one thing to remember about case management is different kinds of communication. Okay, and I know this sounds crazy, but we need to know the difference, and it's in your notes. What is collaborating? What is cooperation? What is compromising? And what is assertiveness? So if you're given a scenario that the nurse is communicating with an insurance company, and here's a scenario, what's she trying to do? Is she collaborating? Is she compromising? So the paragraph in your notes gives you a short definition of what each of them, they seem similar, but they are different, believe it or not. Okay. What else about case management? We wish everybody could be case managed, but that's not the case. The clients we care for are typically the complex chronic illnesses. I use the example of maybe the elderly person that had a triple bypass. One person has a family to go home to. They've scheduled all the appointments. They can get them to all their cardiac rehab. Somebody's there to cook for them. Versus somebody goes home alone. Is that the point where you say, well, maybe a rehab might be better? Because think of all the services that are going to need to be coordinated to help that particular person. So the patient B is the one you would want to be case managing, right? Not A. And then what else did we talk about? Community resources. And then we covered yesterday the human abuse and violence and cultural. Talked about all different kinds of abuse, child abuse, elder abuse, neglect, intimate partner, homicide, domestic violence, suicide, homicide, battery, just all different kinds of the point about human abuse and violence is that we're all going to be taken care of, whether they're victims, perpetrators, or people who have witnessed. These may be adults, they may be kids, and what impact, especially for the kids, does it have going forward? You know, a lot of times when you look at the adult abusers, they have been abused as kids, or they have grown up seeing violence, right? And then culture, we pretty much talked about in length yesterday about cultural competence. I think you have this figured out, right? We strive to move towards cultural competence, which means we can care for any culture. If we don't know about it, we ask. If we don't know about it, we research. We talk to team members. You know, we went through our class today and did cultural, like we did yesterday. And Joy, who just left, she brought up yesterday, it was great. She said, you know, most students were talking about examples with clients. Well, Joy, being Muslim, was able to teach her peers about the culture. So that was different. You know, she recognized her peers had frustrations about why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? She was able to explain to all of her peers, here's how this culture expects to be taken care of. So, again, trusted community leaders, looking for them in the community to help you with different cultures. But overall, our goal as nurses moving forward is to be as culturally competent as we can. And me, after 40 years of nursing, I'm still learning cultural competence. It's just a lifelong learning process. So, and then the 3 kinds of math questions, you're calculating a single dose, calculating IV dose over time. So that's setting the pumps, and then calculating mils per hour. Same kind of questions the last 2 exams. So anyway, questions?
Well, is there not going to be any questions about like cirrhosis or PAD or PVD? Because I was studying them too.
Yep. Yes, yes, there are. Go back through your notes. Whatever's highlighted in your notes as far as infectious communicable diseases, yes. Okay. All right. Questions?
Nope, I don't think so. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. All right. Have a good day.
You too.
Okay. Bye.